New Hampshire primary. Finally, we're starting to get some action. This is March Madness for New Hampshire primary. Hey, Liz. I'm so honored today to have to be able to host on behalf of the GraniteOath PAC and my wife Betty here in our home, a outstanding United States leader, the leader of the government of the state of Minnesota, twice elected in one of the bluest of blue states in this country as a conservative Republican.
Yes, sir.
And he brought his secret weapon with him, and that's his lovely wife, Mary. So we have Mary and Tim. We're so grateful that they're here to spend some time in New Hampshire with us. I know they're just visiting right now, just trying to get a sense about the landscape. But I think they'll also like to talk to us about some issues that really matter to this country. Because you and I know that job one for New Hampshire is to make sure that in November 2012, Barack Obama is not elected the next president. So he calls himself the Sam's Club Republican. He's got the courage of his conviction, the passion of his faith, and I want you to give a warm New Hampshire welcome to Governor Tim Paw'on.
Well, first of all, thanks for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it. Mary and I are delighted to be here. And one of the things that just warms my heart, I just met Nathaniel here a few minutes ago. He drove 3 hours to be here at this event. And this is... It's an affirmation why the Granite State should remain as the state that has the first primary in the presidential race. People in this state are engaged, they're informed, and we're glad to be here to be part of this process. I want to thank Ovid, I want to thank Betty. They are very gracious people. And when you meet... we have the opportunity to work with and pull alongside people of this character and of these values, I hope it makes you feel good about the kind of leadership that you have in New Hampshire, to see people whose hearts and heads are connected, whose feet are on the ground, and they know where their help comes from, and they've got the kind of values that are going to move this state and this nation forward. Thank you, Ovid and Betty. Now, I travel a lot, and we have 2 teenage daughters at home. One is 17, her name's Anna, the other's Mara. We were at an event in Minnesota not long ago, and I was saying to people, if you want to know why Mary's not able to be with me all the time, it's because of this young boy right here who's dating my daughter. I said, so that's him. We got to take care of that, and then the rest would be okay. But I've got some words for you I'll share in just a minute, but I want to introduce and ask my wonderful spouse Mary to share a few thoughts with you. I love her. We've been married 23 years. She's the love of my life. We met at the University of Minnesota. And I know when you take a measure of a person, you want to know what does this person believe, and what are their values, and why do they believe it, and do they have a life record and a record in profession or public service that backs that all up. And I hope you'll check that out as it relates to me. But a big part of who I am and our family and what I believe and what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it is because of this wonderful, wonderful person that I love so much. I introduce to you Mary Paw'on.
I'll come to New Hampshire just to listen to him say that. Fabulous. Well, thank you as well to Ovid and to Betty, who have opened their home, their hearts, their entire lives to public service, and to be able to host events like this is remarkable. I know that it comes with a burden and a price, and so a sincere thank you to both of you for tonight and for all of your work. It's been a pleasure to visit New Hampshire. We had the opportunity before last fall's election to come and visit and to feel the good energy in this fabulous state. And there's just something really terrific about New Hampshire's level of engagement. I feel good just being around people who are this deeply engaged. It's exciting, it's fun. It just, any red-blooded American loves all about New Hampshire, and New Hampshire's engagement and their intensity in the process. So thank you. Thank you for being here, and for most of you, I'm sure it has been many, many years of terrific service and thoughtful consideration along the trail. So I do want to underscore the fact that I won't always be out on the road with my husband for the reason he mentioned, because we have these teens, and both of my teenage daughters have been saying lately, "It's okay, Mom, go ahead." That's when you know that's not a plan. So I have to carefully be sure that they are looked after when I am not there. So just one last comment, and not surprisingly, a spouse is going to pull alongside and say that they deeply love their husband, and a wife is going to come and tell you wonderful things about him. But I can only tell you this from my heart, and perhaps over time, as you become acquainted with me and him, you will know that this just comes from the core of who I am. After 23 years, you know everything about a person pretty much, and certainly he's not perfect. I won't tell you all any of his shortcomings.
Almost perfect.
Yeah, he's pretty close. This is a man who is so deeply kind-hearted. He is, at the core of who he is, just genuinely the nicest man that I have ever known. I love him dearly, but he brings his heart and his kindness to everything he does, and certainly I believe he has brought that to his governing, but he has brought that to our marriage, he has brought that to our family, he brings that to all of his relationships. So I hope as you become acquainted with him and his policies, and he'll speak to that and his record and so forth, you'll become acquainted with the person, Tim Paw'an. So, my husband, Tim Paw'an.
Well, Ovid was right about the need to remove President Obama from the office in the White House in 2012, but I do have to give him credit on at least one thing. Now, he's accomplished something that is really almost impossible. He has proved that somebody can win a Nobel Prize and deserve it less than Al Gore.
Without a doubt.
Now, I know that there's this dispute and controversy about his birth certificate, and I'll just say I'm not one of those who question President Obama's birth certificate, but I do question what planet he's from when you look at his policies. And he has got a direction and a vision for this country that I think is deeply misguided, and those of us who understand that, see that developing, have a responsibility to call it out and make sure that we do all that we can with the gifts, the resources, the time, and the opportunity we have to try to take this country back and make it again and keep it the greatest nation the world has ever known.
Right.
As I travel around the country, there's some concern that people tell you about, and one of the things they think about is, is the country slipping away economically? Are our values slipping away in ways that make, for the first time in the history of our nation, our people wonder, is the future going to be as bright for our children as it was for us? And the answer to that is, of course it is. We've got to be people who are strong leaders, who are truth tellers, and speak truth to power about the challenges we face. But we also have to make sure that we chart a course and set a vision that's positive and optimistic and hopeful and can-do, not just for our party, not just for the conservative movement in this country, but for the United States of America and our future for all of our people.
Amen.
So I tell people it may not be easy, but it's not complex. What we really need to do to get back to those basic, foundational, common sense principles that made this nation great, will keep it great, and will keep us moving forward in a very positive direction. In the interest of time, I won't go through them all, but let me just share a few with you. And it starts with this. Let's remember the founding perspective, the founding principle of this nation. And the founders put it in such simple terms, even politicians can understand it. They didn't say when they wrote the founding documents, we get our rights from our bureaucrat, or we get our rights from our member of Congress, or we get our privileges from some local government official. What they said was, we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. And they put that right into the founding documents of this nation. Now, as you look at this, God made us free. We have our rights and our privileges from God, and the Constitution was drafted with the idea of allowing us to maintain and protect those freedoms. So these things go hand in hand, and it starts with remembering that these privileges come from our Creator. They are given to us and guaranteed through the Constitution. Now, this is not politically incorrect or politically insensitive to talk about. It's in all of the documents that founded our nation and our states. And I'll give you just one other example before we move on to another point. In 49 of the 50 states, the state constitution begins with language like it does in Minnesota. The opening paragraph, the opening sentence says, "We, the people of Minnesota, grateful to God for our civil and religious liberties." And then it goes on from there to talk about the importance of perpetuating those blessings to future generations. Why is that important? Because it sets the perspective correct as it relates to where these things come from. Again, not from government, but guaranteed by our government documents, principally the Constitution and our founding documents. It's a very important point, and I think it's important that we start discussions by reminding people how this started, why it's important, and how it relates to the challenges and issues of our time today. And when we have a government that is moving not towards freedom, but is moving towards a government stifling, suffocating approach to just about everything. When they say, we know better than you and we're going to push into areas that were previously reserved for families. We're going to take over space that used to be reserved for entrepreneurs and the private market. We're going to crowd in and do the things that philanthropy and charity and nonprofits used to do. We're going to do the things that used to be done by neighbors to other neighbors and help and love and acts of kindness. Every time they push out activity that was non-governmental activity, they not only grow government, they not only expand government, they not only raise taxes and try to spend more government money, they do something else that's equally and maybe even more corrosive. They diminish the Americans' freedom and they diminish our sense of the American spirit. That spirit that says, we are Americans, we can do this. We are can-do people, we're industrious, we take individual responsibility, we reach out in love and kindness to help those in need, and it doesn't all need to be done through government. Right. It's a very unique view of the world. Let me give you just a couple of examples on these common sense principles, and then I'll be happy to take your questions. And now this one is really quite complex, so I'll say it a little slowly, and I know there may be some folks on the other side of the aisle who are listening in through the media, and so I want to make sure they can keep up with the point, okay? Are you ready? Here it is. We can't spend more than we take in. I know it's really hard, very complex, but you can't do it as an individual, we can't do it in our families, you can't do it in our business life, and we can't let the government do it anymore.
That's right.
In my view, a constitutional amendment to balance the budget in Washington, D.C. Yes. We need to make sure that we say to the folks who want to raise the debt ceiling, which is really the spending ceiling, no thanks, live within your means. Right. I think we need to look forward to the needs of this country financially and say, we're going to look the American people in the eye, we're going to tell them the truth, but we're not just going to freak them out, we're also going to show them a positive, constructive way forward. And there are ways to do this. Now, you're looking at somebody who is the governor of the state of Minnesota. I love my state. It's a beautiful state. It's filled with really hard-working and good people. But politically, it's a little odd the other way. It's the state that elected Al Franken as a United States Senator. But as Frank Sinatra would sing about New York, if I can do it there, we can do it anywhere. And so I got elected. And re-elected in Minnesota as a movement conservative. And over my 8 years as governor, we did things like this. The spending in my state went below zero. In other words, we cut it in real terms for the first time in a 150-year history of my state. Wow. We cut taxes net, even though we had 2 recessions during those 8 years, over the 8-year period. We did something with spending that is not just blinging it below zero, but we also reformed spending in powerful ways. We did things like be the first state in the nation to go statewide for performance pay for teachers, not seniority pay for teachers. We had market-based, not government-based healthcare reforms, tort reform, welfare reform, public employee pension reform. To give you one example of that, we had a 44-day bus strike in the state of Minnesota. Our regional bus drivers who work for the government wanted to work just 15 years and then be able to retire and get health care paid for the rest of their life. So that's exactly right. And I said, we're not doing that anymore. So we took a 1.5-month bus strike, one of the longest in the country's history. I had people standing outside my bedroom window holding up signs saying, "Palenti's a weapon of mass transit destruction." But here's what I knew we were going to win, and here's what the country is figuring out on this issue and similar issues like it. When you go to a group of people like this and say, "Hey, if you're not in government, raise your hand if you get to work just 15 years and then have somebody pay for your health insurance the rest of your life. Please show me your hands." No hands ever went up. And I said, "Do you know the bus drivers get that?" "They do, Governor?" And then I'd say, "You know you're paying for that?" "We are, Governor." "Do you think that should end?" "Heck yes, Governor." And they're ready to grab the pitchfork and come on down to the Capitol. That little story that I told you is a true story, but it's what's happening all across this country. Just because we followed Greece into democracy does not mean we need to follow them into bankruptcy.